whispers crawl beneath the skin, a shadow's grin.
The wheat came up overnight. Maya stood at the edge of the barren field, her boots sinking into dust that should have been soil, watching something that couldn't be real. Yesterday, this plot had been dead earth, cracked and gray like every other field in Bountiful for the past 18 months. Today it was covered in wheat. Not the thin, struggling stalks she remembered from before the drought, but thick, dark green growth that moved in the wind with an almost liquid shimmer. Her father stood beside her, hat in his hands, and she could hear him crying. Not sobbing, just quiet tears running down his weathered face. Around them, other farmers were gathering, emerging from their trucks and walking slowly toward the impossible field like pilgrims approaching a shrine. Pastor Gideon stood in the center of it all, his white shirt brilliant against the green. He was younger than Maya expected for a preacher, maybe 40, with dark hair going silver at the temples and a smile that seemed to include everyone who looked at it. He'd arrived 3 days ago in a dusty van, set up a tent revival at the edge of town, and promised them a miracle if they'd just pray with him. Maya hadn't gone to the revival. She was home from state college for the summer, studying biology, and she'd spent too many hours learning about aquifer depletion and climate patterns to believe that prayer could bring back the rain. But her father had gone. Her father and most of the town, desperate enough to try anything. And now this. He just prayed, her father said, his voice hoarse. That's all he did. He walked out here after the service, put his hands in the dirt, and prayed for maybe 10 minutes. And this morning, all this. Maya walked into the field, running her hand along the wheat stalks. They felt wrong. Too smooth, too warm, like touching something alive in a way that plants shouldn't be alive. She knelt down and dug at the base of one, exposing the roots. They were pink, a fleshy, almost translucent pink, and they seemed to pulse slightly in the dirt. "Maya, what are you doing?" her father called. "Don't damage it." She stood up, brushing the dirt from her hands, but the image of those roots stayed with her. She pulled one of the wheat heads down, examining it closely. Full and heavy, ready for harvest in a matter of days instead of months. But when she split it open, there was nothing inside. No seeds, just a hollow chamber and that same pink flesh lining the interior. "Something's not right about this," she said quietly. But no one was listening. Pastor Gideon was leading the crowd in prayer now, his voice rising and falling in practiced rhythms, and the farmers were on their knees in the green wheat, thanking God for their salvation. By the end of the week, half the farms in Bountiful were green again. Gideon moved through the town like a conductor, holding prayer meetings at each failing property, and everywhere he prayed, growth followed. Not just wheat. Corn grew to full height in 3 days. Tomatoes ripened overnight. Even old Mrs. Henderson's rose bushes, dead for 2 years, burst into bloom with flowers so red they looked almost black in certain light. The town council offered Gideon the old church on Main Street, the one that had been empty since Pastor Wells died 5 years ago. He accepted with humble grace and immediately began holding daily services, not just Sunday morning anymore. Every morning at dawn, every evening at dusk. The church bells rang through the town like a heartbeat, regular and insistent. Maya attended the first service in the church, mostly because her father insisted. The building was packed, every pew filled with grateful farmers and their families. Gideon stood at the pulpit in a simple black suit, his hands resting on a Bible so old the leather had gone soft as cloth. "We have been given a gift," he said, his voice carrying easily through the space. "But gifts come with responsibility. The Lord has shown us mercy, but we must show the Lord our devotion. Starting today, we will observe the old ways, the proper ways." He outlined new rules. Specific hymns to be sung, specific prayers to be said before meals. Confessions were to be made publicly at the evening services. No alcohol, no blasphemy, no work on the Sabbath. Nothing Maya's grandmother wouldn't have recognized, but stricter than Bountiful had been in decades. Those who walk in righteousness will continue to prosper, Gideon said, his eyes moving across the congregation. Those who stray from the path will find the blessings withdrawn. Maya felt a chill run down her spine, but around her people were nodding. Her father squeezed her hand, his face full of fervent hope. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about those pink roots, about the seedless wheat, about the speed of the growth. It violated everything she'd learned about plant biology. Growth required resources, time, energy. This was something else. She got up and walked to her window. From her room on the second floor, she could see across the fields to where the blessed crops grew. In the moonlight, they seemed to glow slightly, that dark green taking on an almost phosphorescent quality. And they were moving, not just swaying in the wind, but moving independently, stalks bending and twisting in patterns that looked almost deliberate. She grabbed her phone and started researching. Pastor Gideon, tent revivals, miracle crops. She found scattered references, stories from other small towns over the years, always the same pattern. A charismatic preacher arrives during a crisis, brings miraculous relief, institutes strict religious observance. And then the trail went cold. The towns either disappeared from records entirely or became insular, isolated, eventually withering away to nothing. She found one name that recurred. Gideon. Not the same man, couldn't be. The photographs were from different eras. But the name was identical, and so was the face. Or close enough that they could have been father and son and grandson in an unbroken line of identical features. The earliest reference she could find was from Bountiful itself. 1937. A Pastor Gideon had presided over a harvest festival. The town's newspaper had covered it extensively, right up until the day of the festival. After that, nothing. No more newspapers, no more records. Just a gap in the historical archive, and when Bountiful appeared in records again 10 years later, it was with an entirely new population. The Vanishing, one historical society website called it, a minor mystery of the Dust Bowl era, lost in the larger tragedies of the time. Maya took screenshots of everything, her hands shaking slightly. In the morning, she would show her father. They would call someone, the state police, maybe, or journalists, someone who could investigate this properly. But in the morning, everything changed. Maya came downstairs to find her father's breakfast already eaten, his chair pushed back from the table. Through the kitchen window, she could see him in the fields, walking between the rows of green wheat with his head bowed. He looked happy in a way she hadn't seen in years. Her mother was at the stove, humming one of the hymns from Gideon's service. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," Maya started. Her mother turned and Maya stopped. Her mother's eyes were different. Not the color, not anything obvious, but something in the expression. A flatness, like looking at a photograph instead of a person. "Pastor Gideon stopped by this morning," her mother said. "He wanted to make sure we were coming to the evening service. He said it's very important that everyone attends regularly. The blessings flow strongest to those who show the most devotion." "Mom, I found something last night. Information about Gideon. I think he's dangerous." That's a sinful thing to say. Her mother's voice was calm but cold. "He's saved us. He's saved the whole town. You should be grateful, Maya. You should be on your knees thanking God that he sent Pastor Gideon to us." Maya felt her stomach drop. "Mom, please just look at what I found." "I don't need to look at anything. I have faith. Maybe if you'd spent less time at that college and more time in church, you'd understand that some things can't be explained by science. Some things are miracles. Maya backed away, her phone clutched in her hand. She needed to find someone else, someone who wasn't already under Gideon's influence. Old Tom Miller, maybe. He was cantankerous and skeptical of everything. Or Sarah Chen, the librarian, who had a master's degree and valued evidence. But when she went into town, she found the changes had spread faster than she realized. The morning service had just let out, and Main Street was full of people in their church clothes, greeting each other with stiff formality. No one was smiling except in that strange, flat way her mother had smiled. She found Sarah at the library, but Sarah wouldn't even look at Maya's phone. "I don't need to see conspiracy theories from the internet," Sarah said. "I've seen the proof with my own eyes. My brother's cancer is gone, Maya, completely gone. He went to the doctor in the city yesterday, and they couldn't find any trace of it. Pastor Gideon laid hands on him and prayed, and now he's cured." "And Sarah, that's wonderful, but please just listen." "No, you listen. This town was dying. We were going to lose everything. And God sent us a miracle, and you want to throw it away because you found some scary stories online? That's not rational thinking, Maya. That's paranoia." Maya tried Tom Miller next, but Tom wouldn't even open his door. Through the window, she could see him sitting in his chair, his face slack and his eyes fixed on something Maya couldn't see. His fields were still dead, his crops still withered. One of the dissidents, she realized. One of the ones who hadn't embraced Gideon fully enough. She spent the afternoon driving around the outskirts of town, documenting everything with her phone's camera. The green fields, the blighted ones, the patterns of growth and decay. The blessed farms all shared certain characteristics. Families who attended every service, who displayed hand-lettered Bible verses in their windows, who followed Gideon's rules precisely. The blighted farms belonged to the doubters. Not open rebels, just people who'd missed a service or two, who'd been heard complaining about the new strictness, who'd violated one of Gideon's rules. Their punishment was swift and visible. Crops that had been green would turn gray overnight. Animals would sicken. One farmer she talked to, a man named Jenkins who'd been caught drinking beer by one of Gideon's followers, showed her his hands. They were covered in boils, weeping and painful. "Doc says it's some kind of infection," Jenkins said, his voice dull with pain and fear. "But it started the day after Pastor Gideon mentioned my sin in his sermon. Mentioned it by name, said the unrighteous would bear marks of their shame. And the next morning, this. You need to leave," Maya said. "Get out of Bountiful, go to a hospital in the city." Jenkins shook his head. "Can't, tried yesterday, got 10 miles down the highway and my truck just died. No reason, just stopped. Engine won't turn over, and I got this feeling like something was pulling me back, so I walked home. And when I got here, my wife said Pastor Gideon had stopped by. Said if I came to tonight's service and confessed properly, I might be forgiven." Maya left Jenkins' farm feeling sick. This wasn't just religious manipulation. This was something else, something that could affect physical reality. She thought about those pink roots, about growth that shouldn't be possible, about the way the wheat moved in patterns that weren't quite natural. She needed more information. Real information, not just internet rumors, and there was only one place in Bountiful that might have it. The church basement had been used for storage for decades. Maya waited until after the evening service, when everyone was filing out with their faces full of that strange, flat satisfaction, and then she slipped around to the side door. It was unlocked. Everything in Bountiful was unlocked now. Crime had vanished along with doubt. The basement stairs creaked under her feet, and the air below was cool and musty. Boxes lined the walls, full of old records and forgotten church materials. Maya pulled out her phone's flashlight and started searching. She found the old ledgers first, attendance records going back to the church's founding in 1883. Births, deaths, marriages, the neat handwriting of generations of pastors documenting the life of the town. And there, in 1937, a gap. Pastor Gideon's name appeared in April of that year, taking over from Pastor Matthews, who died of influenza. Gideon's handwriting was elegant, precise. He documented his first miracles: drought broken, crops restored. He documented his new rules: proper observances, righteous behavior, punishment for sin. The entries grew stranger, measurements of something he called the harvest index. Names of townspeople with notations beside them: strong faith, moderate faith, weak faith. And beside the weak faith names, dates that lined up with disappearances and deaths. The final entry was dated October 15, 1937. Harvest Festival tomorrow. The field spirit is nearly sated. The thrashing will occur at the moment of greatest communal fear. I have prepared them well. They trust me, and that trust will become terror, and that terror will open the way. The old words were true. From faith comes fear, from fear comes flesh, from flesh comes forever. After that, blank pages. No more entries until 1947, when a new pastor arrived to find the church empty and most of the town simply gone. Maya photographed every page, her hands shaking so badly she had to brace her phone against the boxes to keep the images clear. She found more, buried deeper. A diary in the same handwriting, much older, the paper crumbling at the edges. The earliest date she could make out was 1891. The diary explained everything. Gideon wasn't a man, or he hadn't been a man for a very long time. He'd been a circuit preacher once, in the years after the Civil War, traveling through the Midwest bringing religion to isolated settlements. And in one of those settlements, in a place whose name had been scratched out of every page, he'd found something, or something had found him. A field spirit, he called it. One of the old things, the forces that existed before humans gave them names like God and devil. It wasn't good or evil. It was growth and decay, the cycle of seasons made conscious. And it was hungry. Not for souls, the diary explained. Souls were abstract, useless. It fed on emotion, on the energy that flowed between people and communities. Faith was sweet but not sustaining. Love was too diffuse, too gentle. But fear, real fear, the kind that gripped an entire community at once, that was a feast. Especially fear that came from betrayed trust, from safety suddenly revealed as danger. Gideon had made a bargain. The field spirit would give him the power to create miracles, to bring growth and healing wherever he went. In exchange, he would provide it with harvests. He would enter dying communities, save them, make them trust him absolutely, and then orchestrate the thrashing. A moment of collective terror so intense that the field spirit could manifest physically, could sink its roots not just into the soil, but into the people themselves, creating a permanent feeding ground. Most of the time, it consumed the entire town. Everyone who'd trusted Gideon would be there for the final harvest festival, and they'd all feel the betrayal together, the understanding that they'd been farmed like crops, and that fear would be so pure and strong that the field spirit could feed on it for decades. Occasionally, the diary noted with clinical detachment, a few would survive. Changed, broken, but alive. They would rebuild, and eventually another Gideon would return to start the cycle again. Maya ran upstairs, burst out of the church, and straight into Pastor Gideon. He stood in the moonlight, his hands in his pockets, his expression mild. Behind him, the green fields stretched away into darkness, and the wheat was definitely moving now, stalks bending toward them like heads turning to watch. "Maya," he said gently, "you've been neglecting the services. Your parents are worried." "I know what you are," she said, backing away. "I found the diary. I know about the field spirit, about the harvests." Gideon's smile didn't waver. Of course you do, there's always one. Someone smart enough to dig, too skeptical to be swept along with the others. It's actually important having a dissenter or two. Keeps the fear sharp when the time comes. I'm going to tell everyone. I'm going to show them what you wrote. And you think they'll believe you? Gideon tilted his head. Maya, look at this town. Really look, they're happy, healed, prosperous. Their faith has been rewarded with exactly what they prayed for. You're going to tell them it's a trick, that they should go back to drought and despair? Because of some old papers written by someone who isn't even here anymore. And you're here, you wrote those papers. Prove it, Gideon spread his hands. I'm just a traveling preacher who happened to have the same name as someone from 90 years ago. Coincidence. And even if anyone believed you, even if they accepted that I was somehow the same person, what would they do? I've given them everything they wanted. They'll choose to believe the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable truth every single time. Maya felt despair settling over her like cold water. He was right. She'd seen how people looked at him, heard how they talked about the blessings. They wouldn't believe her. They'd call her crazy, say the college had corrupted her thinking. When, she asked, when is the thrashing? The harvest festival, 2 weeks from now. Everyone will be there in the big field by the church, celebrating the bounty. I'll give a sermon about gratitude and grace, and then I'll show them the truth just for a moment, long enough for them to understand. The fear will be exquisite. And I'll stop you. Gideon laughed, but not unkindly. How? You're one person, Maya, one doubter in a sea of believers, but I tell you what, I like you. You remind me of? Well, of myself before I made my choice. So I'll give you an option. Leave, pack up tonight and drive away. Don't come back. You can live, finish your degree, have a life. Just abandon everyone you love to their fate. Maya stared at him. That's not an option. Then stay and die with them, or stay and become part of it. The field spirit always needs a new Gideon eventually. The body wears out after a century or two. You have the right kind of mind for it. Skeptical, analytical, useful traits for farming humans. He walked past her, toward the church, his footsteps echoing on the pavement. At the door, he turned back. 2 weeks, Maya, decide what you're going to do, but decide carefully. The field spirit is patient, but it's also very, very hungry. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare of frustration. Maya tried everything. She showed her parents the photographs of the diary, but her father said they were obviously faked, and her mother said that even if they weren't, it just proved that God worked in mysterious ways. She went to the sheriff, but he escorted her out of his office and suggested she might need to talk to someone about her stress levels. She tried leaving, thinking she could bring back help from outside, but Jenkins had been right. 10 miles from town, her car simply stopped. Engine dead, no warning, no reason. And she felt it, that pulling sensation, like a hook in her chest drawing her back toward Bountiful. She walked back and found Gideon waiting at the town limits. You can't leave, he said simply. None of you can, not until after the harvest. The field spirit has put down roots. The whole town is part of its field now. Maya watched the changes accelerate. The services grew longer, more intense. Gideon's sermons shifted from encouragement to demands. He wanted absolute obedience, absolute devotion. Anyone who wavered even slightly found their blessings withdrawn. Their crops would wilt, their healings would reverse, their prosperity would evaporate. And they would come back, terrified, begging forgiveness. And Gideon would grant it, but the price was always higher. Public confession of sins real and imagined. Humiliating rituals of submission. The town was being trained, Maya realized, trained to fear losing Gideon's favor more than anything else in the world. By the time the harvest festival arrived, Bountiful looked like a town from another century. Everyone dressed in somber clothes. No music except hymns, no laughter, just quiet, desperate devotion and the constant, underlying fear of what would happen if they failed to meet Gideon's standards. Maya spent the final days in the church basement, reading and rereading the diary, searching for anything that might help. The field spirit couldn't be killed, that much was clear. It was a force of nature, like gravity or entropy. But it could be confused, disrupted, denied its feast. The key was the fear. It needed that specific flavor of terror, the betrayed trust of a faithful community. If Maya could prevent that moment, if she could somehow break the cycle before the thrashing occurred, the field spirit might be forced to withdraw, to wait for another opportunity. But how? She was one person, and the town was completely under Gideon's control. She found her answer in an entry about a failed harvest in 1903. Gideon had set everything up perfectly in a town called Stillwater, but at the last moment, a fire had broken out in the granary. The chaos and panic had been the wrong kind of fear, wild and uncontrolled instead of focused. The field spirit had fed, but poorly, getting nothing but confusion. It had abandoned Stillwater in disgust, and Gideon had been forced to start over elsewhere. Maya read the entry 3 times, her mind racing. Chaos, wild, uncontrolled destruction. The opposite of the orderly, controlled fear that Gideon was cultivating. She thought about the blighted farms, about the gray, dead crops from the people who'd lost Gideon's favor. That grain was cursed, rotten, but it was still connected to the field spirit. It was the product of fear, just a different kind. What would happen if she destroyed it? Not carefully, not quietly, but in the most violent, chaotic way possible. The harvest festival began at sunset. The entire town gathered in the big field by the church, where the first miracle crop had grown. Tables groaned under the weight of food made from the blessed harvest. Children played, but quietly, always aware of their parents' watchful eyes. Everyone wore their best clothes and their most pious expressions. Maya stood at the edge of the crowd, watching Gideon take his place on a makeshift stage. He was dressed all in white now, and in the dying light he seemed to glow. The wheat in the field had grown taller than any wheat should grow, taller than corn, the stalks thick as a man's wrist. And they were moving, swaying in patterns that had nothing to do with wind. Gideon began to preach. His voice carried across the field, warm and reassuring at first. He talked about the blessings they'd received, about how faithful they'd been, how worthy of God's love. The crowd relaxed slightly, smiling their flat smiles. Then his tone shifted. Darker, colder. He began to talk about sin, about the wages of doubt, about the price of disobedience. The crowd tensed. He listed sins, became more specific, mentioned names. People who'd wavered, even briefly. People who'd questioned, even silently. The sky above them began to change, taking on a rust-red color that had nothing to do with sunset. The wheat grew taller, and Maya could see something moving between the stalks now, something vast and pale and writhing. This was it, the moment before the reveal, before Gideon showed them the truth and their trust transformed into terror. Maya ran. She sprinted away from the field, toward the old silos at the edge of town. The dissident silos where the blighted grain was stored. Jenkins was there, still covered in boils, guarding the cursed harvest without really knowing why. Maya, what are you doing? The festival beta euros. Help me, she gasped. Fuel, we need fuel. Gasoline, kerosene, anything that burns. Jenkins stared at her, but something in her face must have convinced him. He led her to a storage shed, helped her roll out drums of diesel fuel. They broke them open at the base of the largest silo, let the fuel pour out across the ground and soak into the foundations. Behind them, back at the festival, Maya could hear Gideon's voice rising to a crescendo. could hear the first screams as people began to understand what he really was. "Light it," she told Jenkins. "Light it now." He struck a match. The fuel caught with a whoosh that knocked them both backward. Fire raced up the side of the silo, and then the blighted grain inside ignited. Not clean fire, not normal fire. Toxic, black smoke poured into the sky, and the flames were wrong colors, green and purple and sick yellow. The silo exploded. Actually exploded, the cursed grain igniting like gunpowder. The blast wave flattened them both, and burning debris rained down across the edge of town. Maya struggled to her feet, her ears ringing. The other silos were catching now, a chain reaction of destruction. The smoke was so thick she could barely breathe, and the heat was incredible. This wasn't the orderly fear Gideon had cultivated. This was chaos, violence, uncontrolled destruction. She ran back toward the festival field, stumbling through smoke and flying ash. The scene was pandemonium. The field spirit had begun to manifest, its vast form rising from the wheat, all writhing roots and grasping stalks, and something that might have been a face made of flowers and thorns. The townspeople were screaming, frozen in the perfect terror Gideon had orchestrated. But now smoke from the burning silos was rolling across the field, and the flames were visible against the darkening sky. People were turning, confusion breaking their paralysis. Fire, here, now, the fear fractured, became diffuse, chaotic. The field spirit writhed. Maya could feel its confusion, its hunger turning to frustration. This wasn't what it wanted. This wasn't the pure, focused terror of betrayal. This was just panic, just disorder. Gideon stood on his stage, his white clothes billowing, and for the first time he looked uncertain. He raised his hands, trying to bring the attention back to himself, but the fire was too bright, too close. People were running now, no longer frozen, scattering in all directions. Maya saw her chance. She ran to the stage, climbed up beside Gideon. The field spirit loomed over them both, its vast form flickering between solid and translucent as it tried to maintain cohesion without the feast it had been promised. "You failed," Maya shouted at Gideon, her voice hoarse from smoke. "It's not getting what it needs. Your harvest is ruined." Gideon turned to her, and his face was no longer mild or gentle. It was ancient, inhuman, twisted with rage and desperation. "You don't understand. You can't stop this. The entity will feed. If not on them, then on you. On the chaos you've created. It will take what it can get." The field spirit was changing, its form becoming less coherent, more monstrous. Instead of the elegant, terrible thing it would have become with a proper harvest, it was turning into something crude and hungry. It reached for the burning silos, toward the chaos Maya had created, and began to feed. Maya felt it pulling at her, not just physically, but deeper. It wanted the fear behind her desperate plan, the terror that had driven her to this destruction. It wanted her. She looked down at her hands. Where she'd touched the blighted grain while rolling out the fuel drums, something was growing. A single stalk of wheat, pushing up through her palm, black as midnight and moving with its own sense of purpose. It hurt. Not like a wound, but like something taking root, putting down foundations in her flesh. The field spirit leaned closer, drawn to this new growth, this personal harvest. Gideon was laughing now, a sound like wind through dead trees. "You see, there's always a price. The entity will take what you've given it, your chaos, your fear, your desperate heroism, and it will plant itself in you. You'll be its new vessel, its new Gideon." Maya felt the entity's attention on her like a physical weight. She understood now. This was how it had taken the original Gideon over a century ago. One moment of contact, one crack in the armor, and it had slipped inside. She'd saved the town, but damned herself. Unless. She looked at the black wheat growing from her hand, at the field spirit leaning close, at Gideon watching with his ancient, triumphant eyes. And she understood something he didn't, something his diary had never quite spelled out. The field spirit needed a community. It fed on connections between people, on shared emotion. That's why it needed Gideon to set everything up, to bind everyone together with faith before transforming that faith into fear. Alone, isolated, a person was useless to it, but Maya wasn't offering herself as a community. She was offering herself as a sacrifice. One person's fear, one person's chaos, one person's connection to the entity. Not a feast, a poison pill. She grabbed Gideon's wrist with her infected hand. The black wheat growing from her palm touched his skin, and she felt the entity surge forward, trying to consume them both, to feed on their mingled fear and hatred. But Maya wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry, furious, and she channeled that rage into the connection, forced it down the link that the field spirit had created when it infected her. Not fear. Wrath. Pure, clean, human fury at being used, at being farmed, at being treated like a crop instead of a person. The field spirit recoiled. Anger wasn't food. Anger was poison. It tried to withdraw, but Maya held on to Gideon, and the black wheat had grown from her hand into his, linking them, trapping the entity between them. Gideon screamed. The entity was feeding on him now, trying to sustain itself, draining him like he'd drained so many towns over so many years. His face withered, his body collapsing in on itself. He'd been kept alive by the entity's power, and now that power was consuming him. Maya felt herself weakening too. The wheat was spreading up her arm, black veins of corruption. But she held on, pouring her rage and her refusal into the connection. You don't get to win. You don't get to have us. You don't get anything. The field spirit gave a final, soundless shriek and collapsed. Not dead, Maya didn't think it could die, but defeated. Withdrawn. Denied its harvest, poisoned by Maya's furious rejection, it sank back into the earth, leaving only the faintest traces of its presence. Gideon fell at Maya's feet, and he was just a man now. Ancient, impossibly old, but just a man. His eyes focused on her face. "You have killed me," he whispered. "No," Maya said. "You killed yourself 130 years ago when you made your bargain. I just finished the job." He crumbled to dust before the words were fully out of her mouth. The field was chaos. The cursed wheat was dying, turning gray and collapsing. The blessed crops were following, all the miraculous growth withering in seconds as the entity's power withdrew from the world. The townspeople were scattered, confused, slowly coming back to themselves as Gideon's influence faded. Maya climbed down from the stage, cradling her corrupted hand. The black wheat had stopped growing, but it was still there, a permanent reminder of what had happened. She walked through the crowd, ignoring their questions and their slow-dawning horror as they realized what they'd almost become. She found her parents near their truck. Her mother saw Maya's hand and gasped. Her father reached out to touch it, then pulled back. "What happened?" he asked, and his voice was his own again, confused and frightened but human. "I stopped it," Maya said simply. "The harvest, I burned it, it's over." In the weeks that followed, Bountiful struggled to recover. Not physically, though the return of the drought and the loss of all the miraculous crops was devastating, but mentally, spiritually. People remembered what they'd done, what they'd been willing to do. The confessions, the persecutions, the willingness to sacrifice their neighbors to maintain Gideon's favor. Some left, loaded up their families, and drove away, unable to live with the memories. Others stayed, trying to rebuild not just the farms, but the community itself. Therapy groups formed. The church remained empty, no one willing to enter it yet. Maya stayed too, though part of her wanted to run. Her hand was a constant reminder. the black wheat growing from her palm like some kind of Gothic jewelry. Doctors couldn't explain it, couldn't remove it. It was part of her now. But it wasn't growing anymore, and it didn't hurt. And sometimes, when she was working in the fields, helping plant normal, slow-growing, properly seasonal crops, she felt something through that connection. Not the field spirit, she didn't think, or at least not its attention. Just the earth itself, the cycle of growth and decay, the ancient rhythms that existed before humans and would exist after them. She'd touched something primordial, and it had touched her back. She'd never be entirely free of it, but she'd also never be farmed by it again. 6 months after the festival, Maya stood in what had been the blessed field, now just dirt and dead stalks. She'd convinced her parents to let her try planting again, normal seeds in normal soil with normal expectations. It would take months to know if anything would grow. She knelt down and pressed her corrupted hand into the earth, felt the black wheat make contact with the soil, and for just a moment, just a heartbeat, she felt the earth respond. Not with miraculous growth, not with anything supernatural, just with recognition. A sense of acknowledgement between two things that understood each other. She planted her seeds, watered them carefully, and went home. In the morning, there were the tiniest green shoots pushing through the dirt. Normal shoots growing at a normal pace, but definitely growing. The town of Bountiful would survive. Scarred, changed, but alive. They'd faced the worst thing that could happen to a community, the betrayal of their deepest trust, and they'd survived. Maya looked at her hand, at the black wheat that would never leave her. It was a curse and a warning and a strange kind of gift. She would never forget, never trust too easily, never surrender her judgment to anyone, no matter how holy they seemed. And if anything like the field spirit ever came to Bountiful again, it would find her waiting. Not a crop to be harvested. Not anymore. Never again.